Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the industry panel here at TechNet Indo-Pacific 2023. Please welcome to the stage Colonel Mike Black, U.S. Air Force retired, AFCEA International's Vice President for Defense.
All right. Oh, yes, sir. They already got me with the Air Force jokes, I guess. I was at the game on Saturday, so we did lay an egg, and congratulations to the Army, sir. All right. Aloha! Aloha! That was pretty good, but when I give a preparatory command, I expect a loud and thunderous return. So we're going to do it one more time. Aloha! Aloha! All right, great. Hey, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this panel, Innovation at the Edge, a view from industry. Innovation cuts across many topics, so we will see a unique set of views on key technologies, architects that are needed to produce capabilities being demanded for the warfighter applications and environments, particularly in this Indo-PACOM AOR. It's my pleasure to introduce the moderator of this panel this afternoon, Tamara Greenspan, the Vice Chair of the Board of AFCEA International. In addition to her role as AFCEA's Vice Chair, she also has served as past President of AFCEA's Northern Virginia chapter. Tamara is a focused, results-oriented business executive with more than 30 years of U.S. public sector service, currently serving as a Group Vice President and General Manager for the public sector applications at Oracle, which she joined in 1989. She has received numerous performance awards for her achievement, including Oracle's prestigious Leadership 2000 Award, chosen by her peers for sustained superior performance and leadership success. Tamara currently serves as the AFCEA International Executive Committee, the Homeland Security Defense Business Council Board of Directors, and is a board member of the Institute for Excellence in Sales, IES, Women in Sales Advisory Board. She and her husband have started a charity in 2000 called KIND, K-I-N-D-H, Kids in Need During Holidays. It's a 501c3 nonprofit that helps low-income families by providing gifts and food during the holidays. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Tamara Greenspan and her panel.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike, for the kind introduction and a long bio. Thank you very much. So very excited to be here today, honored to be here today with these fine panelists, looking to have a very interesting conversation from 4 different industry perspectives on the topics that Mike Black just reviewed for us today. So first of all, we're going to do a format where I'm going to introduce our first panelist. They're going to give 7 to 10 minute overview, and then we're going to go down the line, and then the questions will begin. So I actually have a question prepared for each of them, but as we're going through, if you can please type your questions in to the system at that email, we really are looking forward to, I know they are really looking forward to audience, right? Mr. Aldridge and Sir Garrett, you ready for him?
I have a question for Rich Aldridge. We'll get to that later.
Okay, we'll get to that later. All right, so on my left, we have Dr. Carbone. He's a Senior Technical Director and Solution Architect for ForcePoint. These bios are also in your app. I hope everyone has downloaded your app, the lengthy bios in your app. I'm just going to read a summary. But for the last 35 years, Dr. Carbone has served as a defense industry, as an engineering fellow, a chief science advisor, technical director, chief engineer for innovation, chief data scientist in applied AI with AI ethics and AI security, as well as advanced data science as adjunct professor at Southern Methodist and Baylor University. Very impressive. And his bio goes on to a long list of his accomplishments. It's very impressive. So, sir, I'm going to turn it over for you to share your insights on our topic from today.
All right. Thank you very much. So, thanks for the opportunity to be here. It's fantastic that AFCEA chose me to be up here. I would have not have expected it, but I really appreciate it. So when they originally asked us to give some of our perspectives, I thought about how do I cram 35 years into 7 minutes? Well, especially when we're talking about cloud and AI. So in order to change the conversation a little bit, to think about like the AOR and how large it is, et cetera, but how do we not just enhance things, but how do we achieve dominance, right, which is really kind of what everyone's working towards. The other thought was, how do I dispel some of the myths, some of the rumors, some of the legends, and talk through some of the challenges and also some of the real solutions? Because I don't like to complain about things if I don't at least provide some solutions at the end. So that's what I'm going to try to do. So I looked up a few bits of information last night. So we all know that INDOPACOM is a pretty large AOR. What I didn't know is that it was 52% of the Earth's surface and covered 100 million square miles. And so when you think about, well, how do you apply AI and cloud into this type of location, so how do we actually change the conversation and change what we're doing? Because obviously there's a lot of things that are not working. So let me paint a little bit of a picture for you in terms of what I think the current state of reality is and how we got here. First of all, I want to say the 35 years gives you a very interesting perspective when you're trying to build things that go into really tough places to operate. So the one thing that I usually say pretty often is it's never about the IT, but it's always about the mission. And this is a software guy saying it, not an operational guy. But when you build enough systems and you know what they're out there for, you have to make those things work because people's lives depend on it. So in the early to mid-2000s, we started building high-performance compute environments for some of the IC community. We started working on virtualization, right, to minimize swap and to scale these, what we called then, big data analytics, which basically has now just changed, and we just call it cloud and AI. But it's literally pretty much the same thing. The IP networks still send data the exact same speed they sent them in the 1960s and 70s. Those things haven't really changed. Okay, so what is AI and what is it not? One of the things that is kind of termed as blasphemy when I say it, but I've said it before, and that is that AI is not machine learning. It's a big misnomer to me to call machine learning. A lot of people think it's the main construct behind AI, but AI is such a larger construct than just machine learning by itself. Now, don't get me wrong. It has its place. There are lots of great things we can do with it. But we have to think about it as a small piece of the puzzle in a much larger field of study that crosses so many different disciplines. And one of the big issues that we have is machine learning is very probabilistic. Well, when we do things, we don't do them probabilistically in life. So there's some things that we still need to do. So let me give you just a really interesting example of what I think is needed in terms of we have to capture more context around the information that we capture. So any software engineer in this room, if I ask them, if this code breaks, tell me what else is going to break in your system. That software engineer might come back 3 hours from now, he may come back she may come back 3 days from now. And they might finally have an answer in terms of what other things it would affect in the system. So if we actually knew what those dependencies were as we built the software, those systems could heal themselves. But they can't because we don't collect that data today. So think about this for an example. Not only do we not know those system dependencies, but we use the same Boolean algebra from 1970s in every database that we use. Pretty much almost every database. So if we're going to change things, we have to change the way we do things, and we have to think about them a little bit differently. And what we're doing now is we're taking these complex probability AI algorithms, and we're stuffing them into systems we don't really understand, if you think about it in those terms. So in an AOR that's so large, I think we need to do something a little bit different. Okay, so one other important thing is that even though machine learning has a lot of value, what we need to make sure is just like any other tool is that we don't misuse it and overhype it, but we use it for where it's best used. The more the systems do today, the more machine learning that we add, the more automation is created. So AI for me is a function of automation and no more, no less. You essentially start out, you have manual systems, semi-automatic systems, automated systems, semi-autonomous systems, and then on the far right-hand side you have Hollywood, which is the whole self-evolving piece that everyone's afraid of, which in my opinion they should not be at this point. Think of what it's like to try to build a system that can learn on its own and go places where we don't go today. Like, for example, think of the Curiosity rover, why it was built. Curiosity rover was to find life on Mars. But one of my good professor friends said one time, he said, if the Curiosity rover saw a rabbit on Mars, what would it do? Well, it would do absolutely nothing because it wasn't coded. No one wrote the if-then statements to see moving rabbits on Mars. So it would not even phone home. If the user was lucky enough to see through the camera, maybe they would see the rabbit on Mars. Football analytics. So how many times do you watch a football game and you hear on 4th down on the 2-yard line, you say, the analytics say, you should do this. Well, those analytics are built from thousands of times that people have tried things. But if we actually stored the context, like, do we know, is it raining? Are they playing on turf or grass? Is the other team, does the other team have cleats that are long enough to actually be in the game? Do we have that information? If we stored it, there's a lot more amazing things we could do than just collecting all of the random data that we do today. So what I want to do is I want to leave you with 3 important items that I think about AI/ML and about probability. We need to keep the context that we throw away every day. Every time you do a Google query, all the information you learn, the 10 times you refine that query, is gone as soon as you got to where you needed to be. That context is missing. We have to measure the trust. We have to find ways to do metrics around trust relative to artificial intelligence. That helps us determine what's best for the systems that we build. And the other thing is you hear a lot about, well, AI and ethics. The one other component that people forget to think about is our adversaries don't use ethics when they fight against us. So, I don't know how close I am am I good? Okay. All right. So, just a little bit about cloud, and then I'll finish it up here. So, cloud, again, for me, is simply virtualization and about performance scaling. And it hasn't changed since the 20 years ago when we were doing other things. So, what do we need for dominance? Well, we know that we can apply AI to pretty much any point in life. But what data do you train on when you don't have any data for something? Well, in AI for education, you have to think way out of the box. And my point in the very beginning is that it's always about the mission. So if you're going to teach AI, you have to teach it in an applied way and not just look at, say, hey, I got a new piece of technology, what can I do with it? We need to be changing the whole question in terms of how we ask it. So in order to gain that speed of relevance. So those are my suggestions, along with embedding more engineers with operational folks and embedding more operational folks with engineers, because it's still a really big problem. So anyway, that's my
thank you.
Spiel for today.
Thank you. I don't know if you were at the keynote luncheon. Were you in there?
I was not.
So an interesting question I'm going to ask you. So for those of you who are in the air, I'm going to simplify the ask, but he asked if with AI, are you all in or are you overly cautious? And I'm simplifying his definitions. They were longer. And so it was interesting because you would think everyone raised their hand for all in. A lot did. And then they were asked if you're really cautious. There was only a couple. But I was one of those that didn't raise my hand because I was in the middle. And then he actually said, and those of you who didn't raise your hand, you're probably in the middle. And a lot of hands went up. So where would you be on that?
All in.
All in, okay. Wanted to ask you that. So
All in, all right.
yeah, all in, all right. So I'm going to thank you very much. So we're going on the next. General Yee, thank you very much. General Yee is the Vice President and General Manager for Army and Defense Agencies for General Dynamics. He currently serves in that position, and he is responsible for the successful operation, execution, and management of GDIT's Army and Defense Agency's major programs. So thank you, General Lee, and take it away.
Well, it's good to be here, and thanks to AFC International for inviting GDIT to participate in today's panel. Maybe a few thank yous right off for the 5 friends that showed up today. Jay Chapman, where are you at? Didn't show. He's a no-show. He told me he was going to be here, so I'm calling him out. I don't see May either. I see Makana and Johnny are here in the front rows to support me. I saw Terry Vosford walk in. Thank you, Terry. And Matt Labert over there. So those are my 5 friends that showed up. This is an innovation topic, and everyone, maybe gets tired of innovation at times, talking about it. But my flavor of innovation is converging existing technologies to come up with new ways of doing things or better ways of doing things. And, some really quick examples of convergence was, very familiar to all of us, the phone, the radio, the, GPS, and you have a smartphone, right? That's convergence of existing technologies. Or it could be, cars, batteries, and computers, and you get, what do you get? A Tesla, yes, very good, very good, very good. That was a question for you, Rich. And, oh, you did. You'll be running the company pretty soon, I think as Rich said, right? So anyway, there's convergence of technologies happening in this theater, and I'll talk a bit about those in a bit. But let's just step back a minute, and we're talking about IT and the network. Just a couple years ago, we had, you had to be a CCNA or a CCIA to do some really complicated networking stuff, right? If you're talking like network engineering on infrastructure. And then here along comes software, creeping along. You have the hardware guys, software guys, and at some point, hardware and software converge on the network. What do you get? Software-defined networking, right? Right. So some of that convergence is happening out here in this theater. And when it comes to things like MPE, Mission Partner Environment, right? That's so important out here. That tends to be a network-centric solution to solving these communication challenges that we have, right? It really is kind of a hardware solution that we've been working on for years and making good progress, I'll say. Here along comes ICAM in its own little separate path, maturing, and it's software-enabled, data-centric solution, right? And at some point, what's going to happen if these two converge, right? We're going to have a better result because MPE is typically at the country organizational levels as it's asking, can this organization, their network, connect to this organization's network, right? It's at the organizational level. ICAM, not new, it's been around for a while. We call it IDAM before that, is at the individual level, right? So can this individual connect and have permissions, yes or no, right? And so you have an organizational, network-centric thing happening, and you have this software-enabled, data-centric at the individual level. And when these two connect, these two converge or collide, we're going to have a better solution than we have today. And that's kind of what's happening right now in this theater. And I want to give a little kudos to the operational commands and supporting commands that are out here. I mean, Indo-PACON, Mark Miles and his leadership. You got 311th with General Meisler, the AO for the networks that are out here. You have the First Corps, G6, and you have Eastern Pac G6. Those 4 organizations and those leaders really out here understand that they can't wait for the Pentagon or somewhere back in CONUS to solve their problems because we are in a fight tonight world here in the theater. So kudos to them for saying we need to move out with making some progress in this area, right? They can't wait, right? They can't wait. Anything could happen. So there are examples time and time again where when we are in a crisis situation or we are at war, and we had many good examples out of Southwest Asia where, the need on the ground with, existing capabilities converge to come up with things that make the warfighter safe, more secure, to be able to get things done, right? And out here you can't wait for that war to happen because today we are in competition and we need to be able to get things done today. And so, kudos to those 4 organizations for their leadership in making some progress out here in this theater, not waiting for someone to help them or help them do it for them, but taking some initiatives. So I'll just stop there, and that's the cut point, the tear line, I guess, Tamara, and then you can ask me a question later on.
Okay, great. Well, can I ask you my other question for the luncheon?
Yes.
Are you all in or cautious or middle?
I'm all in.
Wow, okay. So this is a panel of all in. The audience was a little more cautious in the middle. All right, thank you, sir. All right, Admiral, ready? So you are the DoD and NATO data strategies and business development for NetApp public sector. You support that, excuse me, you partner in translating, I really can't see, sir, so I gotta put these on.
You said enough, that's good. That's good, I'll just jump in.
You're good? You
I'm good, I'm good, I'm JC, I'm
okay.
good. Because my NetApp family, and we do a lot of data management, data storage around the globe, but on my NetApp family, can you raise your hand? Everything
wow.
led by
Jeff
Miller that's there. They are simply astonished that I'm up here and I made the cut, to be quite frank, because I barely know a terabyte from a petabyte, and Mario taught me that. But it is an honor to be here. Colonel Black, thank you so much, and please pass my regards to General Lawrence as well, and to the AFCEA Hawaii chapter. We just appreciate the hospitality. I tend to think in things of kind of at a top-down approach, but particularly in regards to a warfighter. We have a lot of panelists here, that are technical experts in AI and things of that nature. But I tend to think in things of that E4, E5, E6, E7 that are running our systems, that 01, 02, 03. That are there on the front line, because I remember those days as, well, who designed this system? When I was in my early days, middle of the Mediterranean, to do our nation's bidding. And we have a couple of aircraft carriers in the Mediterranean now, monitoring the crisis. But 25 years ago, I was there as well on a carrier when we had some of the same issues or so. And so I think that as we look at the implementation of these systems, and so I'm kind of in the middle, to be quite frank with you, because I've just seen so many different systems over a long period of time, both in the military and in industry as well. And so, what are the innovations that I think that are needed in our culture to be able to do that, in our military culture? And, right now, several years ago, and particularly when I first came in, and maybe some of the other folks that are here, it was DoD that was the tops in technology as far as data, C4I systems, communication systems. DARPA, led the way. But now industry leads the way. If you look at Starlink and what they're doing in the Ukraine, all right, if you look at Google and some of the other larger firms, but also I know DOD, and I think I got my friend here from DIU that's here as well, Tony, sat next to, is there are firms that are cutting-edge firms that might be only 20 people or so. And so we're fast followers, but how can we be fast acquirers in our systems? Because some of those folks who have some of these cutting-edge technologies that are that are smaller firms, they don't know about an RFI, they don't know about industry day, they might not have a clearance to go to an industry day. They might not know about the RFP and all of our processes, but those are the things that we need in order to project power, say, in the South China Sea or Sea of Japan or East China Sea. And so I think that with all of these implementations and things that we are doing, again, going back to my warfighter analysis, and I worked for General Mattis and J9, did a lot of experimentation. But a lot of times we design our systems from the bottom up. And so, if I think about a land component commander, maritime component commander, the information warfare commander, air warfare commander, and all of those subcomponents that, they need data. All right, a submarine problem is going to be, the data there is going to be different than an air warfare problem. And so one of my concerns is all the AI tools, decision-making tools that were talked about this morning and even in this afternoon, are we going to design those systems in a stovepipe? Because I know that's our nature. You know, hey, here's the mission, but is anyone looking across? And JADC2, CJADC2, they need that top-down approach particularly as far as the data is concerned, in order to be able to feed the kinds of decision making in a warning red weapons tight environment. Are you going to have an AI system make that decision for you? And so I think these are the kinds of things, and again, these are top level. I'm not going to get into heuristics and probabilities and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, those are things at a policy level that I think that we need to be able to innovate on as far as how do we incorporate that at a fast and faster rate in order that our young men and women who are out on that front line can be able to do our nation's bidding and the things that we need. So, hey, I'd like to say I'm all in for AI, but I've just been around so many different systems. DOD CIO has something like 600 programs of records that's already baked into our PP&E systems and everything. And so how do we break through that in order to, you know, get the drones, get the kinds of things that we need out there to be able to give us the kinds of ISR capability in a large ocean area. So I'll kind of leave it with that. And Mario, I hope you're happy that I got a petabyte different than a terabyte different than a petabyte. In fact, in just one other point, and I believe it was in the this latest magazine. I just want you to think about it. Is they say DOD processes something like 22 terabytes a day, but they said Facebook is up in the petabyte range. So what does that mean to us as a nation and us being able to do our thing and industry being interested in what we're doing if they're managing that much, you know, that kind of data and everything. So thank you very much.
No, thank you very much. All right, and we have congrats to the NetApp crowd. What an impressive group you brought here, sir.
Yeah, I'll give y'all your money a little bit later to be here, okay?
Garrett, what happened?
Where's all my GDIT people? Stand up.
I think NetApp wins. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, you already got trumped.
JC paid a few more folks.
Yeah, sure did. Let's go Navy.
A little fun up here. Speaking of fun.
I'm sorry, the smack. I know the game's coming up. You know, I got to get
what
revved
happens,
up.
man.
You know?
Oh boy.
We'll see.
It's getting heated up here.
I'm feeling pretty good about the Army after the especially after the Air Force game, Mike. just throw that out there.
Mike Block, are you putting up with that? Come on, sir. All right.
Yeah, you do, because you gave me some smack after that game. That's after our game.
It's fun though, right? Isn't it fun? I mean, all industry
Rich was
panel.
an Air Force guy too, huh? Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay. All right, Tiffany, you are going to be the tiebreaker when you think about if you're all in, cautious, thinking about it, and you know it's just a fad moving on. So you're going to break the tie up here, but I'm going to introduce Tiffany first. Tiffany O'Brien is a Vice President and Director of the Artificial Intelligence and Machine Learning Accelerator for Leidos. In this role, she is responsible for developing and implementing all aspects of AI and ML strategy, including the evaluation of emerging technology and the selection and execution of investments in R&D. So you can tell us before or after.
Okay. I think I'll wait and tell you afterwards, and I'll help explain why. I get really excited about the idea of taking human workflows and making them better and more efficient. Let's make humans able to do what they do well and take away some of that more tedious work that you could do. Again, and AI/ML is a great way to do that. I also really like it when we can show entirely new capabilities, just apart from that help us do things we couldn't do before. So my own journey into sort of pushing innovation out into missions Started with a lot of work with the Air Force, doing modernization and automation. For example, taking a very manual process and turning it into a data-driven, model-based process for doing fuel burn calculations for in-air air refueling missions so that they're able to extend. I joined Leidos in order to work on how do we make ourselves able to predict and be proactive about how the DoD reacts to instability in other countries. This is sort of made more possible through things like machine reading. So this was DARPA projects that were working with machine reading to be able to actually use insights from news and from later on social media in order to feed models that could predict instability in a country, or feed models that would be able to look for new indications of cancer. There's a lot of different uses for that. This turned into other applications of this sort of technology to be able to predict cyber attack through early warnings that you get through a variety of different ways, including unstructured text as well as other ways. So a lot of really interesting work with DARPA and IARPA. I was able to follow that with how do we improve the lot of our intelligence analysts in a couple different places. As we all know, or as I'm sure a lot of us here know, they're inundated with information at just an incredible rate, and it's growing all the time, the terabytes and terabytes a day. And being able to use AI and machine learning in this case to be able to pull data and extract information from text and from images and from audio and video, and be able to do this in multiple languages, put it in a way that you can actually then search for and find insights that may go across, for example, for DIA, for a project there, 20 years of collections they had, where previously human analysts had to look at individual collections, they had to know where to go look at it, and then remember where else to go to find their other information. So pulling all that together is possible now because we have, in this case, a lot of machine learning models applied, and because of our abilities to be able to use data at great amounts. Following that, in my current role as AI and machine learning lead for Leidos, I and my team of about 70 data scientists, data engineers, were able to work now on a lot of different problems in a lot of different areas, and that includes things like ports and borders, doing security there. How do you find threats better? And sometimes the threats don't look like threats. Sometimes they're USB connectors, that kind of thing. As well as how do you apply AI ops, so IT and network operations. How do you use AI/ML to be able to predict problems? When you just start to see something degrading, you can predict it and you can be proactive. You can fix it, you can return it, you can do something else. Really, again, I think an important way to be able to make their job easier. And as well as now recently, we've had all the excitement over the generative AI, so these transformer models and large language models. We've been working with them for a while and had used them to be able to do things, again, very human workflows, for example, with working on veterans' disability claims, where you had humans pouring through digital versions of boxes of paper. This is all their past information to say, this is the next test you need, or this is the next specialist you need to go see. And being able to replace a lot of that more tedious work with a model that said, hey, this is what I believe should be some of the next tests based on the language that you used, but not in a vacuum, not just, take my word for it, this is a model saying to do it, let's automate it. Instead, it has an explainability interface. So that explainability says, this is why this model made this recommendation, this is the primary driver. So this is, again, human and machines teaming, which I think is a really is going to be important for us to do for a while as we keep doing Gen AI. And you asked where I would come on that. It's very much in the middle. I believe that we absolutely need to and have to move forward on using the new technologies and AI to the extent we can, because, as I think John mentioned, our adversaries are going to use it anyway. So let's move forward. But the tempering piece is, let's go ahead and use the tools and processes that let us do it, ethically, and being aware of, fairness, being able to do monitoring, have AI governance, have explainability and transparency so that these models aren't doing alone. And finally, importantly to me anyway, is let's not jump into autonomously making decisions through models. Instead, let's start with humans interacting and having oversight whenever possible, and then move, as we begin to trust, be able to move up in autonomy to the point that we can actually say, I can trust this, and I can be a human on the loop instead of in the loop.
Oh, thank you very much. I think that we all are in, but we just need to do it right. And it's going to
So are you
take...
changing your answer now?
No, I'm cautious.
No,
I told you. I'm cautious. I'm not changing it. I'm just agreeing. We're all kind of saying the same thing, but for different positions, right? I'm not saying we're not all in, but...
Well, one of the things that I wanted to say was, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier, is and it talks to your point too, JC, was that one of the things I teach in my class is how to measure trust. If you measure trust in these types of environments and you tie it to the mission, you now have a mechanism that you can use it's real math that basically shows you where you can do things and where you can't. One of the examples I usually give is you might trust an autonomous drone driving itself from the hangar out to the tarmac, but you may not trust it completely 100% flying in an urban environment today. Can it handle all the atmospheric conditions? Why hasn't Amazon rolled out their drone delivery service? The reason for that is because you can't 100% guarantee that all that stuff's really going to work. But if you measure the risk and you come up with mechanisms as to when you don't trust something and when you do, you now have ways that you can bring AI into the systems a little bit easier because now you've actually done the math, if that makes sense. I don't know if you heard me because I wasn't talking directly in the mic, so sorry.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, no, and I think that's why, again, the point, though, is when you make the systems and the systems are engineered, it's so important, though, to have that user, that human that is, testing it all the time to say, hey, does this make sense? They weren't involved in the development. They weren't involved in all the good stuff. But now when you give it to somebody whose mission it is to use it and they test the heck out of it, that builds in that additional layer of trust.
That's right. I think that was Tiffany's point as well, right? Talking about the hands on the human. All right, well, so if everyone really, I'm going to have one question for each panel. Please type your questions in. We're going to go to the audience after this. I'm going to start with Dr. Carbone. What measures are needed to ensure secure interoperability between different services domains and allied forces in the Indo-Pacific, particularly in the context of CJADC2 and Edge solutions?
So we got to choose our questions, by the way. So just wanted to put that out there. But what I want to talk about first is when you talk about how you make, again, how do you make an environment so large, interoperable, but also do it securely? So you have three major challenges that drive that solution. And those three challenges are confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Those three things, I didn't make those up. Those were borrowed from the OT world, from the critical infrastructure space, and they're the most important things keeping those environments up and running. They fit this AOR just as well as they do those environments. So think about, for example, that data comes from, this is all stuff we know, right? Data comes from all these different classification levels behind stovepipe systems. They all have different site security profiles. They're across different services. Some systems have certificates, some have none. And we have to somehow collect all that data. We have to put it in systems. We have to correlate and fuse it. And somehow somebody's got to make a decision from all of that stuff, assuming you can even pull it all together. So when you're talking about engineering solutions and using cloud and AI in this environment, first off, you have to think about all the different things you have to do with the data. Because, as we all know, AI is about the data. But these are all things we don't necessarily do, or some of us do some of them, but not all of them. So the data selection, if it's not, I'm going to say it again, if the data is not mission-focused, you might as well throw it away because it has no value. I don't care what you trained it on, what Berkeley data set you stole it from. It's not going to work if you don't tie it to the mission, you don't collect it from the mission, and you don't collect the context in terms of when and where it was collected. These are all pieces of information we fail to collect today, in my opinion. Data sourcing. Every Intel person in this room that had to stand up behind, in front of one of these guys a long time ago and, say, this is why I believe what I believe, and the other Intel guys in the room, that I believe what I believe, and this is why I believe it. That information, right, that sourcing of that information and where it comes from and where and when it was taken is hugely important to collect all the time. Have you ever seen on Google, when you do a query, does it tell you when the data was collected? Does it tell you where the data was collected? Every piece of data has a home where it came from that we, for some reason, never use. Data synthesis for the AI developers, right? When we don't have enough data, we synthesize it. We create synthetic data to try to cover all the bases. It's still not necessarily mission focused. There are humans that are biased in their way that they create the content, and we've got to find ways to bring that bias out of that data. Again, then we have to cleanse the data, we have to normalize the data, we have to deduplicate the data. All of these things are all important and hard to do, sometimes a little bit easier than others. Then there is this concept called time. So even though we don't even collect the time most of the time, when you're looking at a lot of searches and queries and things that we do, time has an expiration, it has an effective time, it has an insert time when it showed up in the database. How many times has someone seen a piece of information, a piece of intel, and not known the exact effective time? Probably many times. So the concept of data normalization, then, what we really need to do in order to make this entire massive AOR interoperable, one of the things we have to do because of all those classifications and all those issues is we need cross-domain solutions that can handle the encryption, the integrity, the native data sources with the highest performance in order to bring all types of data, ASCII, binary data together into a single bucket so that we can actually make decisions out of them. Now, in the past, it's been more difficult because trying to get these things accredited, the security takes a long time. But now we actually have solutions that a lot of people aren't aware of where you can auto-generate the rules for these things. You can normalize the data so you don't have to create as many rules for the data. There's lots of different ways to do that. But one of the ways, if we're really going to make this theater secure and we're going to be able to move data, we have to use cross-domain solutions that are more dynamic and help us solve those kind of problems to gain what we call, and then actually, they're, again, not my words, they're actually in this actual thing we're doing here, and that is the speed of relevance. We need data at the speed of relevance, and the only way to get there currently to move that data across those classification boundaries are really well-designed cross-domain solutions that are a little bit more dynamic. So that's my rant for the day. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Any comment? Anyone have kind of comment on that? We're ready.
Well, CDSs are kind of a controversial item in the DoD. They don't like having them at all.
They don't.
And so that's what I would call a hardware-centric solution in a way. But now we have software converging with that as well.
Exactly.
So.
I have a software guy right here next to me.
Yeah, your software guy.
All right, General.
I'm just trying to envision that human on the loop, though. Is that person on top of the loop? Yeah. All right, sir. Sorry.
No, we're going to you. We're sticking with you here.
All right.
So what specific emerging technologies or industries do you see as particularly promising for advancing innovation into the Indo-Pacific region?
Yeah, so I kind of led up to that at the beginning, and that was one of the questions that we chose. And for us in the Pacific here, tactical ICAM is enabling MPE. That's what it's doing. Tactical DDIL ICAM is enabling MPE. And that's what we saw at Talisman Sabre 23 in Australia this past summer, where, with Phonetics and GDIT, First Corps, the TSC, the Indo-PACOM J6, and USRPAC G6, came together and said, okay, let's do this. Let's figure out a way. We'll work directly with industry. We'll do it in an operational environment, in a major exercise, and see what happens. And it worked. Oh my gosh. Not only were we able to demonstrate in a live SecRel environment with joint Army, Marine Corps, coalition, Australians, and up to like 11 eyes, I guess, at the time, that we could have ABAC, RBAC, and behavioral-based attributes to validate and credential someone onto the network. Pretty cool. So if you are able to do the individual level identification, credential identification onto the network, then you are protecting the data now. So access to SharePoint, which is data, so data-centric, chat, coalition chat, and then into the mission systems and the security systems, the security stacks. And it wasn't a standalone stack. We came with hardware, and we said, you know what? We'll just put it onto the TSI stack, the tactical stack, and it worked. Now, the technology to make that happen, was a number of COTS solutions integrated together to make this work and to prove it out. And if we step back for a moment, you say, well, we could have waited for, the requirements process to work its way through, which is how, big DoD works, generates requirements, et cetera. And then a couple years later, maybe we have, an RFP that's on the street. In this case, Operations Command is working directly with the providers, iterating on this. And it wasn't perfect out the gate when we were doing the risk reduction events, but that's the whole purpose. And through that, you're actually learning along the way things that you couldn't learn until you started doing it, which is what we did. We started moving out and started learning from this. Now, this is not news to the folks in PACOM, but the point here is that the convergence of technologies, kind of a network-centric thing and a software-enabled, data-centric thing converges together to solve a problem, or just simply said, make our network more secure. So innovation is happening today and live and well by just bringing things together, and there are many examples of that. That's the example I chose to use today because we were involved with that, and we're going forward with future exercises with the members of, Indo-PACOM and et cetera. So Yamasakura coming up in December, that's going to have additional use cases and mission threads to continue to learn and grow this capability, a DDIL, ICAM capability that is not reliant upon the cloud. We took the cloud out of this because in this AOR, you can't rely on that. It needs to be available. You need to be able to federate to the enterprise, but need to be able to operate in a site-isolated environment, whether it's Guam or you name it, island out in the Pacific. So I'll stop there.
All right, thank you, sir. Anyone have any comment before we move on? No? All right. All right, Admiral, are there... Oh, sorry.
No, I just said good stuff.
Okay. Yeah. Are there successful case studies or models from other regions that can be adapted to accelerate technological innovation in the Indo-Pacific?
And there was a panel on that, I think, earlier today, but one of the things that I just wanted to talk about, a lot of you probably know about what's going on over in 5th Fleet with Task Force 59, where they have taken a lot of UAVs, UUVs. Sail drone was one of them, as well as some aerial vehicles, and looked in the in the Persian Gulf in that region to be able to do the ISR that's needed, and we saw and I think they're making a lot of progress in that area, and also working with a lot of allies and mission partners. I think that the goal is to have something like 100 different platforms in that area spread across several countries, and several of those are Middle East countries, as well as some of the NATO allies. And so I think that's something that I know that they're innovating and doing things here in Indo-PACOM, but it's a large area. So do you put it in the South China Sea, or particularly in that Strait of Taiwan? But the innovation part of that also would be, what are the TTPs with that, and what would be the geopolitical implications with that? Because Iran went and basically hijacked and took one of the drones, one of the sail drones, and that caused an international incident. And so, what other innovations that are needed in our national policy that's needed? So it's one thing, and I've learned that, boy, you can have all the greatest technology in the world, but implementing that technology comes policy, the tactics, techniques, and procedures, and how you train your people in order to be able to implement that. And so I think that's going to be on a much larger scale. I think that if we start all of a sudden putting a lot of autonomous vehicles in certain areas and they are near China, they're going to react in one way or another. They do it with their ships right now. So, what do you think that they would do with a drone? But we need that ISR. We need to, we don't want to become, flat-footed, particularly in the undersea warfare area. We can kind of detect when planes are going or when they're massing troops or things of that nature. But in some of the things that you can't detect, I think is where we need. And so an additional comment as far as one of the things with innovation is concerned is that it's just growing exponentially. That is the whole thing, and I call it the frequency, the intensity, and the duration of it. Is the faster that our nation innovates, the more that DoD needs to be able to grab it, put it, and insert it in there. And so I think that we need to be able, again, integrate. How do we do that better? I also saw an article for an FAN-18 was controlling 3 autonomous drones. And so what does that mean if all of a sudden you have a whole lot more out there? And we're looking at again, going to carrier strike groups where over the next 10 or 15 years, they want to have 40% of a squadron on the carrier that's unmanned. And so probably same thing in the other services or so. And so that innovation, I think, is needed because we don't want to put our pilots and folks like that in danger, but that has, impact on that pipeline for aviators and everything else. And so adopting all this technology is great, but I've just seen it where I want to call them unintended consequences, but boy, you've got to put a lot of gray matter, and you've probably seen it a lot too, to what are the policies, procedures, and everything like that go into adopting it. And I think we'll do a great job with AI, ML, cybersecurity, you name it. And by the way, NetApp does it better than anybody else. I'm sorry, I had to get that shameless plug in. I had to do it. But anyway, but basically our nation, can do that. But being able to implement that in order to do the things we need to do, I think is so important.
That goes back to your cautious point. It needs to be done, but we have to figure out how to do it.
We need to be able to figure out how to do it. And again, I just know, developers, if they have to do a certain module that has AI for a specific warfare mission, they're going to do it for that mission, but they may not look at a couple levels above that in order, what is that commander that's a couple echelon above needs. And so the AI and everything is great, but if it doesn't answer the question at that higher level or interoperate with another system, but we've all grown up in our stovepipes. Yep. And so do we want to have AI in stovepipes as well? It's doing very, very good in that particular mission area, but does it talk across to that other mission area? And I think that in order to shorten that kill chain, that is so important, and the data and everything that goes with that.
So true. Thank you. All right, so get your questions in. This is my last question, and then we're going to turn it to the audience. So, Mr. Bryan, in what ways can AI be leveraged to improve situation awareness and decision support? in complex, data-rich environments like the Indo-Pacific, and what challenges need to be addressed?
So one of the places I think we can make a real difference is looking at what we can do with predictive analytics. And I'm using that term sort of broadly because in my mind, I'm referring both to how we're able to do a better job of predicting maintenance or other events, all the way through how do we understand what is happening in a very complex theater, multi-domain operations, a lot of things going on. How are you able to identify both a normal pattern, and then based on what you're seeing that both stays within that pattern or deviates, be able to predict what's going to happen next? Because I think that sort of proactive that ability to respond proactively is going to be really important. And AI is going to be our tool for being able to have that understanding and also be able to do that kind of prediction. Another area I think will be important will continue to be what I'll call cognitive assistance. So this is being able to prioritize information that's coming in for the folks that need to see it, at the analyst level all the way up through the commander level. How do you prioritize what's most important, what's changed the most, what's going to have the most impact, and how do you make it easier for people to actually interact? And so here I'm referring directly to some of what we've been hearing about a lot in this last year with large language models and with the foundation models out there. Having the ability to have a conversational interface with the data you've collected and the insights you have, being able to use natural language, have it remember context, this is what we're talking about, it's not starting fresh every time, I think is going to be a big game changer in how we interact with our systems and our data at all those levels. Then something that has been a point several folks have brought up, data is going to be hugely important here. Leidos does a lot of work with logistics, for example, and these are big, complex problems. I hadn't realized until I started to get more involved how complex a logistics problem can be when you're talking both long-term effects and dependencies between a lot of suppliers. Things that can affect them could be, economics worldwide. You can have someone, go out of business and have a ship float, or have multiple ships out there who can't deliver their cargo because, the ports don't believe they'll pay their dues, all the way through the problems of a truck that's trying to deliver something and having to get real-time information on, road closures. How do you work around it? So very complex. It's an area that we can definitely use AI to improve our understanding of, where the dependencies are, and again, to predict potential problems, and then also, hopefully, to figure out how to fix those problems. And logistics data, getting back to the data piece, is apparently in many cases it's very traditionally stovepiped. So you have a lot of different systems, they're maintaining very important data and a lot of history that we could learn from, and how to bring all that together in a way that's fast and scalable and still allow someone to again have that insight and that interaction, I think will be really important and is not a solved problem yet, even though we've been all working on this for a long time. And then finally, getting into one of the fun parts, which is, autonomous vehicles. And to me, I think that is going to be more important as a human-machine teaming piece again. There's another DARPA program that we were part of that showed the ability of a human to work with, in this case, a team of drones, and have those drones using, in this case, reinforcement learning to learn. So this is like they use this for playing games. You have them out there trying to find ways to accomplish, collaborate and accomplish a particular mission, do the same thing without running into each other. But the interface, the information is coming back to the human, and they're able to guide and say, no, wait, don't do it that way for some other reason, or do it this way, or even in some cases to learn new tactics that they hadn't thought of that the AI was able to come to as a new way to accomplish something. And I think that will be an important way to be able to manage some of the collection, and that we'll presumably be wanting to keep doing and to be able to improve is not just having drones out on their own, but having a human-machine team to be able to do this more effectively and efficiently. And I'll just sort of close with, again, it's going to be important for any of these potential, improvements in AI to work. We're going to have trust, and that's going to be trust on the end user and trust on the sort of the system owner, the people that have to put systems out there, and trust that they won't be attacked and successfully have vulnerabilities that will be attacked and allow them to be suborned. And all the way through the public, because the public both here and in these geopolitical areas that we're talking about, if they are feel that they are, that the AI is acting in ways that are counter to what should be, humanity would expect, or we're countering ways that can happen, that will cause a lot of difficulty in achieving our particular aims.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tiffany. All right, do we have questions loaded? Oh.
We do have a number of questions from the audience. The first one is intended for Dr. Carbone and Ms. O'Brien. And there's some explanation here first. So for some organizations, cloud is more than just virtualization. It's also about connecting cloud services to manage specific workloads at the fog and mist level of compute, which we expect to be critical in a DDoS environment. Compute at this level allows warfighters to detect patterns of life, assist in targeting, and identify known threats at the tactical level at a much faster rate. What can industry do to help DoD manage data at this level to increase the lethality of our warfighters?
So, is that okay? So one of the things that I didn't talk about earlier that was actually in my notes is, if you remember how cloud began in the early 2000s or mid 2000s when NSA was deploying basically those type of solutions, what happened was there were so many applications that had to spin up just to make things function properly and scale things appropriately. It made it unwieldy. You couldn't use it, and we were trying, and back then we were using distributed databases. We were connecting across networks. You couldn't always control whether the connectivity was there, and you were trying to constantly replicate databases everywhere because everybody needed the information that everybody else had, but you couldn't always get it there. So what I would say is, and unfortunately it's a little bit cliche, is that you have to keep those systems at the edge as simple as you possibly can to do the work that you're trying to do, and keep out as much superfluous things that do not need to be there. It's a really big problem. It's been a problem since the mid-2000s, and it's still a problem today. Specifically, I'll just talk about big data platform, which many of you have probably used in the past. There are so many applications that you have to remove from that thing in order to make it work efficiently and effectively. And I guess what I would say is I agree with you 100% that in order to have that lethality at the edge, to do that compute at the edge, you have to have applications that can still do what you need them to. But focus on the mission, what is really required at that edge component, and use that as your guiding stick to help you figure out what really needs to be there, and get rid of all the other junk that's on those servers that don't need to be there. That's what I would say.
And I'll just add, I agree with you very much. To me, I think you had a good point with what we're doing at the edge and the cloud. And the cloud gives us the ability to rapidly scale, right? So if we want to be very responsive, if we want to not get caught with long tails of maintenance and other things, and I think we need that ability to both develop quickly, stand things up quickly, scale quickly, and just as quickly shut it all down and repurpose, which ties into our ability to do software-defined networks and a lot of that capability as well. But one of the areas I think we still need a lot of work in is part of having things on the edge is also the communications. And both, how do you reduce those communications? I think that's an ongoing, I know that's an ongoing challenge that we have, so that we're not overwhelming all of our bandwidth with just the communication from the edge devices to some sort of a central cloud area. But also just how do we take what's on the cloud and make it available more generally, and in a way that can be used for making these kind of decisions more quickly at the end.
Yeah, can I just add something? That's an interesting question because typically this industry asking government that question. Typically we're asking, the government, what can industry do for you? And so whoever asked that question, I'm curious, was it an industry person or was it a government person? But anyway, interesting. Go ahead. Sorry, John.
No, it's all good.
All right, next question, please. There we go.
Thank you. Next question is, how can industry help transform the DoD's complex program ecosystem with 600 programs of record, multiple CIOs, et cetera, to produce relevant capabilities faster? Is it an acquisition problem, policy, technology integration?
I feel like there's a theme happening here from whether it's an industry person asking industry. I mean, as members of industry here, all four of us, we see things that government can do to operate more optimally so that industry can respond to the government's, requirements. And so I'd reverse the question and say, from an industry perspective, what could the government do to, help transform some of this stuff, right? But the thing is, government's always working on that all the time anyway, having just recently come from that. And so it's a super tough question to answer. I think it's worth it, though. And, I think that, our companies here are probably doing what we can to help, what I would say, skate to the puck, right? So as we see where the government needs to go, we are all making additional technical investments, however we call them technical accelerators at GDIT, but we are all investing in areas where we think that the government, our customer will need at some point in the future, right? We're not investing today for today solely, we are, but we're investing for things that are 2, 3, 4 years out so that when the government gets to that point where they can use it, we are ready for them, right? And over time, if we can do things like converge, hardware and software and have software-defined networks, then we could take down some of that legacy infrastructure over time and help, make a more healthy network ecosystem, as an example.
Yeah, I think also the soft community is, has some, speeded up acquisition requirements, but also to offer some perspective over in my career when there was a pressing operational problem, they figured out how to get it done. Excuse me. Remember during Iraq, early part of Iraq War, there was an up armor problem on some of the unmanned vehicles and also body armor for our soldiers. Excuse me. They cut through that pretty fast. Maybe I didn't like the question.
Well, that's a good example
Excuse me.
Of DevOps, right? You're iterating in the operational world. You're not taking it back to some lab and then bringing it back out there. You're iterating literally in the field. Oh, that you bolt that piece of armor on, it falls off. Oh, that didn't work. Let's try something else, right? And eventually, you got to a better place with MRAPs within a very short period of time.
Yeah. And I remember when there were the jammers, when a lot of the convoys were getting blown up or whatever. I remember a CEO of one of the companies that I was with getting calls from AT&L and all the head acquisition folks, and they were issuing sole source contracts. And when they get the production line and things like that, it's unfortunate that it has to be something that happens operationally to make that happen. But our government has the ability to be able to do that. But that's where both industry and government need to be able to work together to be able to rapidly go out and do the things to support our troops.
Yeah, so that was when the Navy converged with the Army, because those Duke systems were like, electronic warfare systems off of Navy vessels.
Yes.
Put them onto an MRAP or Humvee or whatever. That was another conversion or collision or whatever you call it.
Yeah, but it worked because there was a operational problem, and so unfortunately, again, I hate to say that it has to be a problem to be able to do it, but it's something that we've got to be able to, crack through that barrier, as our competition doesn't necessarily have the same kind of acquisition system. And our acquisition professionals are good. I know a lot of them and things like that. But, as China and all these other folks, as they innovate, we've got to be able to do it, particularly because industry is spending more in R&D than DoD does collectively, and they have the talent that we need in order to do that, particularly in the areas in the C4ISR areas. They're just ahead of us, and so industry or the government has to find a way to be able to catch up.
So let me ask: does it help when someone like Leidos or one of our large, more traditional defense contractors gets a team of some of those smaller, non-traditional folks from the commercial world and makes them part of a team so they're more able to make the capabilities evident?
Yeah, I think we're seeing that. People are seeing that a lot more, in that they're using some of the larger companies that know how to go through the acquisition process in order to be able to bring in some of those other companies, and I think that's going to be part of the problem, or part of the issue of being able to solve that problem. But I think it's part of policy, it's part of the acquisition, but the technology is there in many ways. I think the technology is there, and I think some of the things we're doing in AI, cyber, and all of those things, it's almost akin to like the space race in the 60s when we said we're going to have a man in the moon. Boy, all of the engineering efforts and everything like that were that way. And I think that because AI and some of the technology is just not ubiquitous here to the United States, is that we've got to be able to keep up with the rest of the world as well.
So how do we get rid of the red tape, though? Like, for example, as an engineer and doing in this space for a long time, one of the things that I've seen more times than I hate the fact that I've seen it, is that we built amazing capabilities a decade ago that, because there weren't any TTPs for it, they just took the code out. And it would have made a huge difference, relative to the operational fight. But the point is, as technology gets even faster, right, and we develop more and more things, and it just gets, again, more and more faster, how do we change the TTPs faster in the non-operational wartime environments? I guess that's my question. To pile on.
Are you asking me?
Yes.
We're asking Rich.
Rich.
No,
actually, General E and JC would be great.
What's your question, Mr.
It's
Aldridge?
you
going to stand up?
No, while you're thinking about the answer, I think that one of the things that we're starting to see is folks that have been from in industry are starting to go into the government at a high level. I've seen several folks that are in ATL and a couple of other areas that are starting to come in to start bringing some of those different thinking and everything that's in there. It's going to take a while because the government moves fast, moves slow, as does industry as well.
Yeah.
And so I think it's and what they say, and I hate to talk about the soft stuff. We got a lot of engineers and everything up here, but that requires a cultural change, and culture is hard.
Yeah.
Culture is hard, and so I think that answers part of that. Now you can talk now.
Go ahead.
If you had something now.
Yeah.
So 6 months ago, I was an Air Force PEO. So what I would share is that there's a current crop and generation of acquisition professionals that are just as frustrated with this stuff as industry is. And now that I'm on this side, you get a different perspective. One thing I will say is where I think industry can help is a lot of the large companies have liaisons and lobbyists with Congress. And let's be honest, Congress doesn't want to lose their oversight and insight, right? So the PPE process that was built in 1970 by Secretary Packard is very strong. So they don't like outcome-based requirements. So the whole purpose of DevOps is an outcome, right? We want this to occur. It's not very defined. We don't have all the requirements in detail, but we know what the end state wants to be. And so that's why DevOps is so great on the software side. still don't like that. So I'd say that that's probably the biggest barrier right now on why we can't fix this acquisition problem. Because I do think you have, very willing patriots on the government side willing to kind of blow up the system, and you have industry really want to be hand in hand. But as long as Congress still wants that oversight, insight, and know who to hold accountable when the taxpayer's $300 million goes down the drain, they want something very specifically prescribed. They can say, well, 5 years ago or 3 years ago, you told us you're building this widget. You did not build it. Why not? We need to hold you accountable. So that's probably an area where having those industry executives having those conversations with the committee members to help walk them through why an outcome-based or capabilities-based requirements is better than the old school 300-page requirements documents, thou shalt, thou shalt, thou shalt. It's just not realistic.
But they're still there.
And one other thing I'll share too is a lot of the Air Force POs, we would joke in a room and say, our counterparts in China right now aren't wringing their hands over the bar. That's very true.
It's true. I think we're getting the plug here. So.
The bonus question.
All right, well, Tamara and panel, I just want to say thank you on behalf of AFCEA International and AFCEA Hawaii. Thanks again for your time today with us in this invigorating discussion on how industry can help accelerate innovation in the Pacific. Tamara, I thank you for bringing that AI question to the forefront again. I think we had 3 in the middles and 2 all-ins. Dr. Carbone, all in. He talked about how to measure trust and the real math. General Yee emphasized convergence, and he was all in. He talked about tactical ICAM as an enabling MPE. Admiral Caesar was in the middle. He talked about the warfighter perspective and the top-down approach. And Tiffany was very much in the middle. She said AI governance starts with humans interacting more and being on the loop as opposed to in the loop. As a thank you to our speakers this week on behalf of AFCEA, a donation to the Friends of Windward Wounded Warriors. I got through that. That was a tongue twister when I was practicing. Windward Wounded Warriors will be made in your name.